Hi there, it's Bike Touring Mike here. This time I'm gonna talk about the top 5 mistakes that bike tourers make when they go on their bike tours. Starting with number 1, and this is by far the most common mistake, and that is overpacking. And it's not just beginners who make this mistake, even people like me who have been going on bike tours for several years keep making this mistake over and over again. What people usually do is they pack 3 or 4 shirts to ride around in. When it comes down to it, you're probably just gonna use 2 of those and perhaps even 1. Think about what you're packing and then cut it in half, and then you should be good to go on your bike tour. Another tip is to pack everything maybe a week ahead of your bike tour, and then try to live off the things you have packed in your panniers. Take your fully loaded bike when you go to work, and after that week has gone by, you just remove the panniers and you go out on a nice evening ride, and you feel the difference, how the bike performs and feels, and then you're gonna probably rethink how much you have packed. Number 2 is overplanning, and I'm certainly guilty of making this mistake myself. I'm an avid overplanner. So before I leave on my bike tours, I'm usually in front of the computer for a couple of weeks or so and looking out things I want to see on the bike tour, and looking out possible spots to camp during the nights. So how is this a bad thing, you might think? Well, by doing this you put a lot of stress on yourself, thinking that you're gonna make it to that next camp spot in the evening, and a lot of things can happen on a bike tour. You might end up getting a mechanical or just taking a detour to look at things that you find along the way. And by overplanning, you're just gonna feel a lot of stress and frustration and feel like a failure that you're not making the goals that you set up before you left on the tour. However, there are good things about overplanning. You have this sort of loose guideline to fall back on, so you can go off on your detours, but you still have this basic route that you can fall back on. And the opposite of overplanning, underplanning, can also be a bad thing. Let's say you have just 1 or 2 weeks to go on your bike tour, and at the end of the bike tour you feel like you sort of let yourself down, that you didn't have enough time to go and see all the things that you had sort of planned. If you had made a more structured plan, you might have been able to get to see all of those things along the bike tour. So a sort of middle ground is probably what you're aiming for. Not overplan, but don't underplan either. And another aspect about underplanning is also to forget to check the forecast for the coming week or 2, so that you don't prepare enough and bring the wrong gear. So always check the weather ahead and bring the proper rain gear. Point number 3 is to put too much focus into going to a certain destination or making a big amount of miles or kilometers in the short period of time that you have for your bike tour. Rather than enjoying the journey, the whole trip starts revolving around making a certain distance. Might miss out on beautiful things that happen to pop up along your route because you have to make it to that certain town in that certain time. So I think you should always set off some time to be able to go to these things that pop up along the way, because you're gonna find some really nice gems along the way that you didn't find in a guidebook or by studying your trip on the internet. And another thing here is to start your bike tour pretty slow. Maybe the first couple of days, take the distance that you plan to cover in those days and cut it in half. Because the first day you might have flown into a city or town, or feel a little bit jet lagged or just tired from the journey to get there. So maybe the first day or 2 you're gonna feel really tired on the bike. So be sure to start out pretty slow. Otherwise, if you have set up this goal that you're gonna make 100 kilometers or 100 miles the first day, you're just gonna be disappointed and start feeling stressed about not making it to that end goal at the end of the bike tour. Point number 4 is to bring the wrong gear or use the wrong bike. You're probably gonna spend around 5 hours each day on the bike, and if you have a bike that's really unsuited for your body, you're gonna feel a lot of aches and pains at the end of the day. So please make sure that you're comfortable riding the bike you're gonna take on the tour. If you're planning on buying a new bike, I recommend you to give it a couple of weeks to really break in the bike before you go on your tour. Just to compare, if you're planning on running a marathon, you probably shouldn't buy a couple of new pair of shoes the day before you go and do that marathon. You're just gonna end up with a lot of blisters on your toes. So it's the same thing with a bike. Be sure that you break in the bike, especially if you have a new saddle or new pedals on the bike, to make sure that you have adjusted that before you go on your bike tour. Otherwise, you're just gonna have a really lousy time on your bike tour. And speaking about the gear, make sure that you're familiar with your gear, that you're able to set up your tent before you go on the bike tour, because some days you're gonna have pretty long days and you might end up getting to the camp spot just when the sun starts setting. So you're probably going to experience setting up the tent in the dark. So it's really important that you know how to do this ahead of going on the bike tour. And it's also important to know how to take care of your bike during the bike tour. I'm just speaking about basic maintenance, as taking care of a flat tire and putting the right amount of pressure in your tires and cleaning the chain and so on. And lastly but not least, point number 5, and that is by going touring with the wrong touring partner. When going touring with another partner, you're probably gonna realize after a couple of days that there are some difference between you and your partner. Let's say one of you is a morning person and one of you is an evening person, and you sort of mismatch your schedules all the time. And another thing can be that you might be a strong cyclist while your partner is just a beginner at this whole bike touring thing. So you end up having to wait for one another all along the tour. Another thing that might differ between you and your partner is that maybe one of you just want to make it to that end destination while the other one wants to stop and smell the roses and take in the sights around you. So that can be a source for a conflict along the tour as well. So there is one really simple solution on how to solve this problem, and that is to go on a solo tour. You don't have to compromise anything. You can just set the agenda for that day yourself. When you wake up in the morning at your time of choosing, you eat breakfast and then you cycle until you feel like setting up camp for that day, and you avoid conflicts between you and your partner. So I really recommend you to try going on a solo tour sometime in the future. Those were the 5 mistakes I plan on speaking about in this video. Another mistake you can make on a bike tour is to leave a pannier behind. That happened to me about a year ago, and if you want to take a look at that debacle, you can just click the link up here. Otherwise, until next time, have a good one.